Hi everyone, it's Andy from Adaptronic here. This video is going to be basically a bit of a blog post about setting up traction control on our race MX-5. First of all, I just got a new body kit from Auto Connexion in the US, and I just got time to put it on the day before I went to Wakefield Park for testing. So it still needs to be painted and everything, but yeah, that's what it looks like in the pictures. The track I like to test at is Wakefield Park, which is about 3 hours south of Sydney. What I normally do is drive down the night before, spend the day at the track and then drive back the same night. I have done it before. I've driven down in the morning, spent the day at the track and then driven back afterwards, but it makes for a very long day. The session that I ran at was called a speed off the streets day. So that's only $120 for the day, and you get several sessions of 15 minutes long each. The cars are split up into street registered cars, tin tops, so production based race cars, and open wheel race cars. One reason I really like Wakefield is that it's a fairly tight track, and even the fastest bits aren't all that fast, which is good if you're a novice driver like I am. There's also very few places where you can actually hit anything because there's only one wall. Also, if you're in the tin top class, which is unregistered race cars, there's very few cars on the circuit at the same time, which means if you're trying to find limited traction like I am, you don't have to worry too much about hitting other cars. So this is a quick tour of Wakefield. As you can see, turn 1 is just a kink. The hardcore drivers don't even brake for it, but I do because I'm a wuss. Turn 2 is right-hander, which you need to change down to about 3rd, 4 before you head up the hill. You normally get up to 4th gear before you need to brake for turn 3, which is a bit of a left-hander. Turns 4, 5 and 6 are really part of a complex. You need to treat them as such. The exit on turn 5 can be a bit bumpy, which makes it a bit hard to put power down, especially if it's wet. Turn 7 is a fairly high speed sweeper, and then you need to brake before turn 8, which is also called the fish hook. Because it was wet during the day, I kept locking it up on the entry to the fish hook. Turn 9 is a moderately high speed right-hander before the final back straight. And then turn 10 is the final turn before the main straight. Now, we made some changes to the way that the traction control works at the request of Simply Sports Cars. This is based on their experience with setting up traction control on race cars using the Modular ECUs. The way they generally set it up is with proportional only ignition cut, and they use a gain of about 3, which means that if our slip is about 10% above our target slip, then we cut the ignition by about 30%. So our ECUs give you the control to cut increments of 1% of ignition. So you can cut 1% of the spark, or 2% of the spark, or 3% of the spark. So the first thing I did was I did some practice warm-up laps, since I haven't driven the car around a track for about 8 months. Because it was raining on and off all day, it was actually a really good environment for testing as well as gaining experience as a driver. It also allowed me to measure what sort of slip we get before the car starts to lose traction on power down. In general, what I found was that it tended to lose traction when the slip got to about 8 to 10% on power down on corner exit. So I tried using a target slip of about 10% with fairly high gains, but what I found was that the traction control would actually come on in straight line even when there was no wheel spin. But it also didn't really seem to catch the car if you were putting too much power down on corner exit either. So the next thing I did was I set up the ECU to detect when the car's turning by the difference in the speed between the 2 front wheels, and I made it reduce the target slip when that wheel speed difference gets above a certain amount, down to getting 0 target slip with the difference of about 4 km per hour between the 2 front wheels. The way that I worked out what that difference was by looking at the log files. So in this car we're using a Race Technology DL1, which logs all 4 wheel speeds, and in the analysis software I'm calculating the slip, and I can also see the difference between the 2 front wheel speeds. So this particular part here was coming out of turn 10, which is the main turn just before the straight. In this case I'm in 2nd gear and I'm either putting down too much power or using too much steering angle, and you can see where the car loses traction. So although I came up with some settings that generally helped and were better than not having it at all, I didn't really get a set of numbers which I found really comfortable with. I think part of this was because the target slip values need to change between whether it's wet or dry, especially with these R-comp tyres that I'm using. But secondly, I don't think we actually have enough data from the wheel speed sensors. This version of the MX-5 didn't come with ABS, so what I'm using is GT101 sensors being triggered by the backs of the wheel studs. So this means that we only have 4 pulses per wheel revolution. And what that means is that with the car accelerating linearly, each wheel speed gets updated only 4 times per revolution, which means that until we get the next pulse, that it's still reading the former speed that it had at the last pulse. This becomes pretty evident in the calculated wheel slip, because you can see that even though the wheel speed is raising fairly quickly, the slip, which is calculated by measuring the ratios of the speeds, is quite jaggedy and noisy. And I believe that's because the data doesn't have the resolution that we need. The fact that Simply Sports cars using the same ECU and pretty much the same settings have had better experience with the Lotuses, where they're using the ABS sensors, suggests that that's the main area that I need to improve on this car. So I think the next thing that I'm going to update is try and fit ABS sensors to the car, and then we'll do some more testing after that. But in the meantime, I'm improving my skill as a driver as well, which is always good fun. Thanks very much, everyone. For more information, please go to adaptronicecu.com.